Alright, Happy New Year. Today we're going to talk about the top 5 functions that every beginner programmer must learn. And it doesn't matter which programming language you're focusing on. If you're focusing on Java, Python, C, C++, C#, whatever programming language you're learning, every beginner programmer should know these 5 C programming functions. And the real reason why I believe every beginner programmer should learn these functions is because every programmer should learn how to code in C at some point in their programming journey. I always recommend that beginner programmers learn C because learning C really forces you to understand how computers store and process data. And every programmer that you know that is successful in the software development field has had some experience in C, and these functions that I'm going to mention in this video, they probably know these functions too. Alright, back to the top 5 functions. This was a really hard list to make, and that's because it really depends on what you're trying to program, but I thought this would be a really cool video, especially if you're new to functions. I know knowing about functions and all these libraries in C can be intimidating and also overwhelming because there are so many functions out there. So I'm just going to focus on the functions that are really important, the ones that I've seen used a lot, especially for beginners. And hopefully this gives you some clues or some ideas and some inspiration on how you can use other functions in these libraries as well. The best way that I've learned how to use functions is through example code. So I'm going to be going through some example code and show you how to use these functions. And then at the end, I'm actually going to go over a bonus set of functions that you really need to learn if you're a beginner at programming. So let's get started. So my name's Henrik and I'm here to help you learn the foundations of software development. So let's get started. But before we begin, I'd like to mention that I do have a free workshop for you. It's called my Capstone Project Workshop. And in that workshop, I go over 3 secrets to coding your own Capstone project in just 3 months. And if you don't know what a Capstone project is, it's just a personal coding project where you apply all your newly acquired coding skills into one personal project. Now, why did I create this workshop? The most common goal that I get from people who apply to my one-on-one programming mentorship program is to, quote, be more proficient at creating projects. You and I both know that learning how to code is more than just memorizing code syntax. It's about applying your coding skills to real-world projects that make you feel confident and capable. A lot of new programmers tell me they struggle with turning what they've learned into something practical, and many feel overwhelmed trying to go beyond tutorials to build their own thing. So if this sounds like you can download this workshop in the link in the description, and if you download it and watch it and pay attention to what it says, then you'll definitely build a good foundation to your software development journey. Alright, I know I said the top 5 functions, but it's actually going to be top 10 functions. And that's because I'm going to be going over top 5 pairs of functions. And you'll see why in a moment. And that's because these functions are very closely related. So for the first pair, for example, we're going to go over printf and scanf. So these 2 functions are very similar in that printf is to display data to the user and scanf is to get data from the user. Okay, so here we have our main function, and here at the top we have to include the library stdio.h, and this is for printf and scanf so that we can use those functions. This is the library that has those functions. If we want to use these functions, we need to include this standard library. So we're going to include that. And then, like I mentioned, printf is just going to print this to the user. So we're going to tell the user to enter your name. And then scanf is going to get the user's input and then store that user input into name. This pair of functions are really important. And these are probably the first 2 functions you would learn if you're learning how to code in C. And so let's run this program. So what it's going to do is going to ask for the user's name, then it's going to display a menu for selecting the favorite subject, and then it's going to ask the user to enter 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 for the choice of the favorite subject from this menu. And then we're going to have a switch case statement where we're going to say what the user selected. And that's it. So let's run that and see what happens. All right, my name is Henrik. Hello Henrik, please select your favorite subject from the menu below. So we gotta do programming, obviously, right? Because that's what we're studying, or that's what I'm teaching about. So, all right, so you chose programming as your favorite subject. All right, the next pair of functions that are really important are strcpy and strcmp. And as I like to call them, string copy and string compare. And in order to use these functions, we need to include this string.h library. And the reason why these two functions are really important is because this is how you're going to do a lot of comparing of strings and setting of strings. And so let's just come down here, and it will make more sense when I show you an example. And so here, if we look at this switch case statement, you'll start to notice that I'm having a common printf for each of these cases. And ideally, I want to move this printf to the end of this switch case statement. So I want to have something like this. So ideally, I want to have something like this where I'm setting favorite subject inside the switch case statement. Instead of having all of these printfs, I can just have one printf right here. But in these different cases, I can store the literature string and the chemistry string and the subject string inside this favorite subject string. If you've coded in other languages, this is what you might think you would do for these cases, but in C you can't do that. And that's because in C, favorite subject is actually an array of characters. So here, char, favorite subject, and then it's an array. So it's an array of characters, and so you can't just set an array equal to this quote here. So this is where string copy is really important. This is where string copy really shines. So instead of doing this is what you would do in C. So instead of setting this char array to this sequence of characters here, we would just use strcpy instead. So this is effectively the same thing as this. So this is why strcpy is so important. So let's replace everything in this switch case statement with strcpy. All right, now I'm using the string copy function to copy mathematics here, programming here, physics here, chemistry here, literature here. And this corresponds to the menu that I gave the user here. And so now let's run this one and see if this printf statement actually works as we expect. Okay, hello Henrik, please select your favorite subject, and I'm gonna say programming, and you chose programming as your favorite subject. All right, now what about string compare? Now we're gonna ask the user if they believe that they're good at their favorite subject. Okay, so we ask here, do you consider yourself good at favorite subject, yes or no? And then we're going to use scanf to read the response from the user if they believe that they were good at that subject. So after we get the response, then we can have a if and else statement to give a different response to the user depending on what the user says. If the user says yes, then we'll say this thing, and then if the user says no, we'll say another thing. Now, like I mentioned earlier, if you've coded in other programming languages, you might think that this is how you would do it. And so this is where string compare comes into play. So string compare is going to compare the response string to this string. So instead of doing it like this, we would do it like this. So we use string compare here, and basically what string compare does is it compares this string with this string, and if they're the same, then it's going to return 0. And so when it returns 0, and it's equals to 0, then this is now true. So if the user says yes, then we'll printf this statement here. And then if the user inputs no, then we'll have this string compare function. It's going to compare no with the response, which was no. And then if they match, then this string compare function is going to return 0. And so if it equals 0, then we know that the user selected 0 or inputted 0, and then we're going to printf this statement here. And then if the user puts a response that is not yes or no, then we're just going to say invalid response. So let's run this. Do you consider yourself good at programming? Yes. That's great. Being confident in your skills is important. All right, something interesting is that if we do this again, and then I say Henrik, and then I say 2, and say I do yes like this. If I do yes with a capital Y, now this is not gonna be true anymore. It's not going to be equals 0 because this yes has a lowercase y and this yes has an uppercase y. So if I do this, it's going to say invalid response, please answer with yes or no. And so this leads me to my next pair of functions that are really important. The next pair of functions that I'm going to go over is toUpper and toLower, and basically these just takes a character and it converts it to uppercase, or if you want to convert it to lowercase, you can use toLower. And so in order to use these two functions, we need to include this library here, ctype.h. And what we can do with these two functions is we can come all the way down here, and we can get the response of the user, and we can convert it to all uppercase or all lowercase. And then no matter what the user inputs, if they put some capital yes or they put yes with a capital S at the end, this one will still be true because we converted the user's input to all lowercase. And so if we convert the user's input to all lowercase and then we compare with this string here, then it's going to actually return 0, and this will be true, and then we'll actually come to this printf statement, which is what we want. So let's code that up. All right, so here we have a for loop, and then we're just going to go through the response, and then we're just going to convert it to lowercase. And so we go character by character, and then we convert each character to lowercase, and then we store it in the response array. And then when we come after this for loop, whatever the user inputted here, it's all going to be in all lowercase. So let's run this. 2, and then say yes, all caps. And now it says that's great. So now it's able to know that even though I did all caps yes, it converted it to all lowercase, and then it compared that lowercase version to this lowercase here, and then it says that's great. And so the same can be done for the to upper. So if we convert this to upper, and then we need to do this. So we need to make the string compare to compare with this all uppercase version of the yes. So let's run this one, and then 2, yes. And so you can see here, even though I did all lowercase yes, when it compared with the lowercase yes to this yes, it actually came in here. And that's because it wasn't actually lowercase. We had converted it to all uppercase. So to upper and to lower are really helpful functions if you want to make sure that we get a response from the user and we don't care we don't want it to be case sensitive, then using to upper and to lower is how you would do that. All right, now pair number 4. So pair number 4 is rand and srand, and you need these two to create a random number generator. And actually this pair is not a pair, it's actually a trio. So we need these 3 functions here, rand, srand, and time, and we need them all together working together, and I'm going to show you how to use them together. But we need them all together in order to create a random number generator in our programs. And random number generators are a way to add some sort of spice to your programs, add some sort of randomness, so make your programs more interesting. So we're going to seed the random number generator with the current time here. And then down here, we're going to ask the user a random question based on their favorite subject. So let's ask some random questions about your favorite subject. All right, so we have this list of possible questions. Do you think blank is difficult? Would you like to pursue blank as a career? And then we're going to have a random number generator. We're going to have a random index between 0 and 4. And so we're going to use the rand function here, and then modulo 5, and then store that random index here. And then we're going to randomly choose one of these questions from this with this index, and then we're going to do a printf. And then one of these is going to be put here, and then favorite subject will be put in %s, and then we're going to ask yes or no. And then same as earlier, we're going to ask the user, you're going to use scanf to see what the user's response is, and then we're going to convert the user's response to all lowercase, and then we're going to use string compare. Then we're going to give a different response depending on what the user says. If they say yes, then we're going to say interesting, looks like you have a positive view of whatever. Or no, and then say that's okay, everyone has different opinions about whatever. So let's run this one. 2, do you consider yourself good at programming? Yes. Let's ask some random questions about programming. Do you prefer theoretical programming over practical applications? No. That's okay, everyone has different opinions about programming. Okay, now let's try doing this again and see if we get a different question. Okay, so here's a different question this time. Do you enjoy solving problems in programming? So yes. Interesting, seems like you have a positive view of programming. So now we added some sort of randomness to the program. Now the program is more interesting. And of course, you can use a random number generator to do all kinds of things. All right, now the last pair number 5, is going to be POW and square root. And of course, I had to add some sort of math functions, and I think these are the most common math functions that you would need to use when you're writing programs. For example, if you want to make a program that will calculate the area of something or calculate some distance, then you need to use POW and square root, and you need to include this library here in order to use them. So let's actually use these if the user uses or inputs mathematics. We're going to tell the user to calculate the distance between 2 points. All right, in this part of the program, after the user says whether or not they're good at this subject, if it's math, then we're going to come here and we're going to use strcmp. We're going to say if it's math, then we're going to say, since you love mathematics, let's calculate the distance between 2 points. So we're going to ask the user to enter the coordinates of the first point and then the coordinates of the second point, and then use scanf to read those in. So given those 2 points, we're going to use the distance formula. So we're going to do POW and then x2 minus x1 for the x coordinates. So we're going to square that. And then for the y coordinates, we're going to find the distance there, square that. Then we're going to find the square root, and then that will give us the distance. And then we're going to say the distance between these points. And then we have the random question at the end. So let's run that. So this time we have to do mathematics if you want to get those points. Yes. Since you love mathematics, let's calculate the distance between 2 points. Enter the coordinates of the first point. So 1 and 6. The coordinates of the second point, 5 and 8. So the distance between these 2 points is 4.47. All right, so there you go. Those are the top 5 functions that every beginner programmer should know. It doesn't matter what programming language you're gonna learn. Printf, scanf, the first pair, string copy, string compare, you have to learn that. And that really gives you some insight on how computers are actually storing strings. Of course, if you learn the higher level languages, you don't really see that part on how computers are storing strings. But with C, you see it very clearly. And then we have 2 upper, 2 lower. Those are really helpful functions. And then we have these functions here for the random number generator, and then these math functions here. So these are probably the top six libraries, I would say. If you're starting out learning how to code, just look at these libraries, include these libraries, and then make some amazing programs. All right, now for the bonus pair that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. So the bonus pair is going to be malloc and free. And the reason why this is a bonus is because this is actually more for advanced programmers. So if you're just starting out learning how to code, I would say don't worry about using these functions yet. Focus more on the other functions that I've already talked about. But if you've already known about those functions and you want to challenge yourself a little bit, then start learning how to use malloc and free and when to use them. So malloc and free are one of the main reasons why I recommend that beginners learn how to code in C. And that's because malloc and free introduce you to the concept of dynamic memory allocation. Dynamic memory allocation is a fundamental concept in software development, and that's because when you write programs, these programs will require you to have lists or objects or arrays where you don't know the sizes are. So for example, in this program, I have this program that will calculate the sum of a list of integers, and say we want to give the user the freedom to determine how big that list is going to be, and then based on that, how big that number is going to be, we sum those integers for the user. So here we ask the user to enter the number of integers that they want to input, and then we have to use malloc to allocate memory for those integers that the user wants to input. And then we check here if the memory allocation is successful, and then here we ask the user to input the integers. So we use this for loop, and then n is the number that we got from the user here when we ask the user to enter the number of integers. Then we're going to calculate the sum of the integers here, and then we're going to output the sum of those integers and show the user what the sum is, and then we have to use free to free that memory that we dynamically allocated. So every time you have a malloc it always needs to be concluded with a free at the end so that the computer knows that it can use that memory once again. I'm not going to go into too much depth on this program. This is just a program to highlight malloc and free. But the main feature of this program is that the user can sum any number of integers that the user wants. And so we give that freedom to the user. We don't limit the user to only summing like 10 integers or 5 integers. No, the user can sum however number of integers they want, as long as the computer has enough memory to hold all those integers. So let's run this program. So the number of integers you want to input, let's just say 5. And the integer one's going to be 4, 2, 3, 6, 8, and 4. Okay, the sum of the entered integers is 24. Now let's do it again. Let's use less integers this time. Let's do maybe 3 integers this time. So integer 1 is going to be 7 and 4, 6. Alright, so that's malloc and free, and as you can see, you can do a lot more complicated things with your programs if you really understand how to use those functions. And like I said, those functions require a little bit of experience. You have to work with them a little bit, build some projects that use malloc and free. There's going to be some frustrating moments, but it's worth it because it teaches you how your program stores data, manages data. And this is what's really nice about C. In Python and other higher level languages, they take care of the memory allocation for you. And so you don't really understand how that memory allocation is done under the hood. And so that's why I believe beginners should learn how to code in C. Alright, so there you go. Those are the top 5 functions that every beginner programmer must learn. The first one is printf scanf. Second is string copy and string compare. The next pair is to upper and to lower. The next pair is rand, srand, and time. That's actually a trio. And then pair number 5 is square root and pow. And then the bonus is malloc and free. Alright, now that you know these functions, I hope it really empowers you and gives you some new ideas and new inspiration on some programs that you can build next. And I'd love to hear your thoughts too, so please leave a comment down below which function you're going to use next in your next programming project. Like I mentioned earlier, I have a free workshop for you, my Capstone project workshop. And in that workshop, I go over 3 secrets to coding your own Capstone project in just 3 months. So if you want to become more proficient at creating your own projects, you want to move on from these tutorials and create your own projects, then be sure to check the link in the description and watch my coding workshop today. Alright, that's it for this week's video. I hope it really helped you out. And if it did help you out, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comments section and I'll be sure to answer you there. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.